This video is about the form module or the forms tab in the clients module. Forms are set up in administration, and you can see right here we've just kind of set up a few of them, and the one I'm going to actually demonstrate today is the CIQ Office form that John sent me, which is the newer one that I think you guys are using right now. Essentially the reason we set it up this way is when we were first developing the system, I asked for samples of the forms that were being used in the office, and I was sent pages and pages of different forms. So we needed a way to be able to essentially not tie the system into being set to very strict and stringent forms, because what it appeared to us when we were looking at the forms was that the forms change, you add new forms all the time, so we didn't want a system, we wanted to develop a way in the system where you essentially could control the forms without us having to do any of the work. So it just makes the system much more self-manageable if you guys can set up the system yourself. I have done a video on this, but I'm just going to quickly show you essentially what our thinking was. When you create a question in the forms module, it essentially links it to the form. You type in your question. There are two different sorts, and I'm not going to go into that in any kind of detail, but essentially you can group them under a heading. Like, for example, you could, say your first grouping, actually I think I've done this with the patient, yes. So in the patient tracking form, the first grouping is how did you hear about us, and so underneath that you'll see who is your current doctor, how did you hear about us, and why did you choose Dr. Mendelsohn. Then you could start a new grouping. Okay, and then as you type in the new grouping name would appear in this drop-down list. And so it's just a way of being able to group together related questions and have them sort together and stuff like that. So I'm just going to go back to this form again. And then what we realized was that besides being able to control kind of what the questions were, if they would have a heading or not, and how those would print out together, there were a whole bunch of different ways you guys were answering the questions. So for example, it could be just a straight text answer. You just type in something. It could be a date. It could be a yes or no question. There could be a graphic that needs to be inserted. Or you could have an option list, and there's the option list listed there. So when each question is set up, you essentially say, what kind of response are you expecting? Are you expecting it to be a text response? Should it be a yes or no response? Or like the first one, is it an option list? And this one actually, and you can choose multiple. So for example, this one is an option list. So I'll show you what this looks like in the staff module, but this is an option list. With the other, you can also type in an other response as well if they talk about other things. Okay? So I'm just going to go into the clients module now. And essentially, the other thing that can happen too, when you're setting these up is you can say whether or not they should default when a new record is created. So for example, what this means is that every time you create a new prospect or patient record, this new patient tracking form will automatically be added to their record. And same thing with that one. Whereas if you look at the last one, the primary care referral, this is an optional one, which means that you would add it in only if it was applicable to that patient or prospect. Okay. So I'm just going to go back to the main menu again, go into my clients module. So here's my client record. I'm going to click on the Forms tab, and as I said, these two, when my record was created, were already added to my record. So if I click on one of them, I'm selecting it, you can see it turns yellow. These are the questions that were set up in the administration module. So if I click on the first one, this pop-up comes up. You can see the question is up here. So I would just click on the things that were interesting to me. And then if there was anything else that I wanted to talk about as well, I can't think of anything to put in here. You would just type it in, and then you go to your next one. how did you hear about us? This one we could have a drop-down list, but you could just type it in. Are you interested in meeting with one of our professionals? Yes or no? Do we have approval to contact you? Approval to send you information. Best phone number to reach you at. My email address. Now this is not filling in fields in my record. All this is doing is collecting information. Oops. So once this is in here, then you would add it back into my patient record. And what you're seeing too is what we've done is highlighted what applies. So anything that's in yellow, that's what's applicable to this question. All the blue stuff means it doesn't apply, so just ignore that stuff. Okay. And you'll see too, you'll notice the difference between the blue questions, the black questions and the red questions. What red means is that this hasn't been completed yet. So if you look here, you can see all of these answers have been filled in and this one hasn't been. I can click to complete it, to manually complete it, just so that it doesn't show up. Over here, what you can see too is these are all of the questions that have been attached to my record. So this includes both of these forms. I can filter by completed, incomplete if I want to see what hasn't been finished yet. And then these things can be printed. If you click the print button up here, it'll print what is being filtered. So what you'll see here is that it puts up the name of the patient, what their client ID is, and their chart number. It's grouping them by form, so there's the CIQ office form and the new patient tracking form. You can see too, here is that little subheading, how did you hear about us? There are the questions, okay? If you wanted to see just what a form looks like when it's printed, so I've selected the CIQ office form. If I click print here, so what you'll see is there's the form name. Up here in bold are the questions, and then in whatever non-bold, so I'll just blow this up a little bit for you guys. So the questions are bolded, the non-bold answers, yeses and nos, phone number, fax number, and I didn't fill that in, so that's why that hasn't been filled in yet as well. And that's essentially how they work in here. I don't think there's really anything else. If you want to add a form to a patient or prospect record, you just click on this list or click on that field and it'll pop down the list of all of the forms that are available. You just check the one or select the one that you want, click add form. It'll bring in all the questions. Actually, and I'll show you, this is kind of interesting. So right now I've highlighted that one, so it's showing me these questions. One of the things that the administrator can set up is whether or not the question applies to patients or prospects. So obviously this would apply to a patient, but this was just a sample that we've set up. So now that I'm a patient, it says this question is not applicable to patients, so you would just skip over that and go on to the next one. Okay, if I was in, and you can see as well, it's grayed out, so it's not going to show up on your list of items that need to be completed. If I go over here and I added that form, what you'll see is now I'm in a prospect record. All of the questions are valid for this person. Okay, so that's kind of the difference between patients and prospects. You can actually, as an administrator, set up which questions are relevant to patients and which questions are relevant to prospects, so that it's very clear to the person asking the questions whether or not they need to ask that person the question. And I think that's about it.